Welcome back to Between the Levees. I'm joined today by Captain Steve O'Farrell, currently with ARTCO, has been in the industry for 39 years. We'll get right into it, though. Captain Steve, welcome to the show.
Hello. It's nice to meet you, and it's a pleasure to do this.
Yes, sir. Thank you for responding to my inquiries that evening. Um, Starting out, an individual on Facebook recommended you, Devin Cooper. I don't really know the connection. I assume you've worked with him in the past, but tell me about Devin.
Devin, Devin's kind of a quiet guy. He, uh, I'd say he's kind of a gentle giant. Uh, Pretty good sized young man. Uh, Devin always done a good job for me. He was a little when he first started riding with me. He seemed like he was a little slow, little distant. Uh, didn't really warm up to uh, or have a outgoing personality, I guess is the best way to put it. And after a while, he loosened up. Uh, he was he was I guess, like I say, quiet, shy, reserved. And after working with him for a while, and telling him, I kind of pulled him to the side a couple of times and said, "Hey, here's what I expect. Here's what you're expected as a deckhand, uh, and if you want to move up, this is what you excuse me, this is what you're going to have to do." And he uh, he responded well. He left for a while, uh, tried a new job adventure, I guess, and came back to the fleet side. Uh, and he told me, whenever he was getting ready to leave, that he thought he was fixing to try something different. And I told him, I said, "Look, you go ahead, and you know if you don't think that this is for you, fine. It's not for everybody." I said, "But you're doing a great job, you know. And if you decide that you want to come back," I said, "leave on good terms, and maybe it'll work out and you come back." Well, he ended up coming back, and he went back into the fleet side. And I think Devin is a fleet mate, if I'm not mistaken, up in St. Louis now. Uh, but I think he's done a pretty good job. I always thought he was well spoken and kind hearted, and he was very receptive to, I don't want to say constructive criticism, but he was uh he was open to uh to accept the challenge of, you know opening up his eyes and doing what was going to be needed as far as a deckhand, and one that wanted to move on up in rank.
Thank you for that, Captain Steve. And Devin, if you're out there checking this out, thank you for the recommendation. I think this will be a good chat here. So you mentioned, of course, before we started recording, that you're the captain on the Andrew C. McMillan with ARTCO, and that you have a steerswoman currently, Miss Karla Evans.
Yeah.
Tell me what you can about Miss Karla. I'm hoping to release her episode a week after yours, to kind of bookend this story on the Andrew C. McMillan.
I got you. Uh, yeah, Carla's doing a great job. She's coming along. She uh she listens very well. Uh, if you if you don't want if you don't want her to get over in a certain part of the river, don't don't direct her that way, because she'll go. Uh, she don't hesitate. Her reaction, she follows orders, I guess is the best way to put it. Uh, Carla was a cook on the Andrew McMillan, and she decided that she wanted to make a change. That was something that she had always wanted to try since she'd started on the boats. And right after going on the Andrew, I was approached with, taking the task of steering Carla. And I told them, I said, hey, since she's a female, I have to check with my wife first, because I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And Carla and we've, I guess, developed a relationship, kind of like a big brother, little sister relationship. And she's really country. She does good. For someone that never was really, other than after she decided that that's what she wanted to do, is start steering the boat. She started to go out on the tow with the guys, learning all the ropes, as far as what it took to hold the barges in place, what kind of leads she would have to have, what it was going to take to pick up and drop barges, everything that it was going to encounter, to make it work and make it happen. And then started steering. She had started steering some for I can't think of his name now. That's that COVID fog kicking in. I apologize. Marvin, Captain Marvin, that was on there before I started riding the Andrew. She had started steering with him some, and anytime after she would get her job done as a cook, she would go up, she would steer some every chance she got. And but since I want to say a little over 2 years now, she's been steering on there with me. And now part of that time, they had tied up the boat. We had a couple of gearboxes go out, and had a little delay in there. And she and I would go to another boat, steer some, and then come back and hang out on the Andrew until something would open up, And she goes, she has took the initiative to go to the fleets a lot and steer on the tugs, which is, that's a blessing right there. I mean, just getting to operate the tugs and getting more knowledge about how to maneuver the boats and stuff, that really helps in her adventure and advancing in her career. So yeah, but yeah, she's coming along. I would say hopefully by sometime the beginning of this next year, we'll have her cut loose as a full-fledged heavy tow pilot. So
That's pretty incredible. I don't know that I've heard of someone going from the galley to the wheelhouse.
yeah,
Um, but Devin did tell me that same evening that she is a hell of a cook. I just didn't realize she was originally a cook on the boat.
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that conversation here coming up here pretty soon. But let's begin. You mentioned Devin sort of started a little slower than some other deckhands may have started, a little more withdrawn maybe. Tell me about life as a deckhand in 1985 versus in 2020.
Big change. And I'm sure, the previous years in the, say 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, compared to the 80s were, a lot different. But the mid '80s when I started. Uh, the challenge, you know, it was. I'll say this: it was just starting to change out as far as where safety was coming into the picture. Uh, in the mid '80s, early '90s, safety really ramped up. Uh, when uh, when I started at Exxon, uh, the only time we had to have a long sleeve on was when we were out pumping the barges. That that was a requirement as a tankerman. Uh, you had to have long sleeves, long pants. But uh, shortly, I would say around 98, uh, 97, 98, they they really started ramping up on the safety side of it. Uh, the safety man that we had at Exxon, uh, Doug Lambert, he told us all at a meeting uh, that Exxon would be, they would set the bar for the safety level that was going to be endured for the industry itself later on to come. And he was right. Uh, because at that time, I don't know of anybody else that was having to wear hard hats, safety glasses, uh, gloves, long sleeves, knee pads, elbow pads, and earmuffs. When you decked out in a deckhand uh, safety PPE at Exxon, you needed a water pack as well, one of those camel packs, because you was fixing to endure a lot of heat. Uh, but it was an adventure, uh, and I met a lot of guys throughout the years at Exxon. We still, you know, till today, uh, stay in contact. Whenever whenever I was on deck as a deckhand tankerman, uh, the second trip that I was out there, uh, Captain Charlie Bruner started me. He I walked up, was cleaning the wheelhouse, and he turned around. He said, "Hey, you know how to drive one of these?" I said, "No, sir, I sure don't." He said, "Well," he said, "hold on to this thing." He said, "I need to run down to my room. I'll be right back." Well, from there on, I was hooked. Made up my mind. That's what I wanted to do right there. Uh, if I was going to stay out there, driving a towboat was the only way I could see to, you know, make that happen. And here I am, 39 years almost later, and still still working on them and doing exactly what I decided I wanted to make a career out of. Uh, uh, Not only Captain Charlie, but uh, Captain Carl Nugent and many others. Jim Jim Hardy, little Jim Hardy, uh, all of those guys. They kind of give me the fever, I guess, because I would I would sit down. I always ask, "Hey, you care if I drive?" Uh, anytime I got a chance, that's what I done. When I'd get off watch, I was going up bugging them, wanting to drive, and that's that's where it all started at. And, but like I said, a lot of those guys there at Exxon, they became more like family than just co-workers, you know. Um, we've always kept in touch, and some of them they passed away, you know, and I miss them dearly because I talk to them at least once or twice a month, you know, and they paved the way, you know, for me to learn what I did. I appreciated that. Captain Carl Nugent, that he started me out training. He said one thing that stuck out that he always told me. He said he called everybody kiddo. He said, "Kiddo, if you don't ever remember anything else," he said, "you always remember where you come from, and you'll always know where you're going to." And that kind of stuck. Uh, I've used that several times as well, and there's a lot to it.
Well, let's start at the very beginning. Where were you born? I guess what was life growing up? How was school for you? What eventually led you to the industry, to Exxon in 85?
Well, I grew up in a small town. Uh, there wasn't any industry of any kind. No, during 1985, jobs were really scarce. If you didn't work in the logwoods or farm, you know, you probably didn't work at all. So I had a cousin that called me up and wanted to know if I wanted to go to an interview, go to work for Exxon. And I said, sure. I said, doing what? He said, working on a towboat. I said, what the heck is a towboat? He said, I don't know. He said, it's Exxon. It got to pay good. So that's where I started at. Went to an interview in Greenville, Alabama. Uh, and there was 200 and I want to say 280 something people interviewed, and 22 of us got picked. And I happened to be one of the 22. I can remember uh, Miss Karen asking me what made me want to, or what made me think that I wanted to work away from home. I said, well, there's no jobs here. I said, and I'm not scared of leaving. I said, and if it's hard work, I said, I've had to do that all my life. So I might as well try to make some money at it while I'm doing it. And she pretty well told me that day that she felt like I would be one of the ones picked. Wasn't no guarantee, but I said, well, I'll be waiting on the call. And my dad, uh, which is, as a matter of fact, he's 83 years old today. Uh, we're going to have a birthday party for him tomorrow. And he drove a truck all my life. And actually, that's all I ever wanted to do growing up was drive a truck. And after going to that interview, and he told me, he said when he found out how many people there were at the interview, he said, boy, they ain't fixing to call you. He said, you don't have a clue what working for Exxon would be. I said, well, I said, if they call me, fine. If they don't, fine. He didn't believe it whenever they called, and anyhow, uh, it it's kind of interesting, you know, that, and my cousin that invited me to go to the interview, he never got called, or they did call him, but they called him and told him that he wasn't picked. So he told me, he said, I won't ever call and ask you if you want to go to another interview. I said, I hope you don't have to. But Yeah, he's never worked on a boat, so uh, he uh, he ended up driving a truck, but uh, that's where it all started.
Well, you said you were working your whole life. What kind of work were you doing prior to finding Exxon?
Well, I started at 19 whenever I started on the boats. Uh, I turned 19 July the 26th. I got on the boat July the 31st on the Exxon Kentucky, which is now the uh, Captain uh, Quentin Craig Harris. Uh, but uh, I was doing laboring for a block mason outfit, working on condos and stuff down on the Gulf and Gulf Shores, Alabama. And that I had ended up uh, getting laid off on that, and was in the process of helping my uncle. Uh, he had a mechanic truck, was working on log equipment and stuff like that. So that's what I was doing whenever I got called for the interview.
Well, tell me about the Exxon Kentucky, and I guess your first time stepping out there. How was deckhand training back then? What was the deal?
We Exxon put us through a 2-week course. Uh, we we spent a lot of class time. Uh, they had 2 guys uh, teaching the class, and the second week that we were in the course, they brought us out to the fleet there at Exxon, right below the Exxon docks in Baton Rouge, and put us out on the fleet. Had us laying winch wires and few ratchets and wires and stuff and lines and all that. Uh, Letting us get just an example of how hot it really got. And there it was in August. And I'll tell you, in August, it got hot. Uh, and when, uh, when we finished the course, I went home for 2 or 3 days and then come back and got on the Exxon Kentucky. And whenever I got on the Kentucky, they were doing 12 loads from Baton Rouge up to Memphis. Uh, we would make drops at Greenville and some at Vicksburg, I think, and uh, make a couple of drops on the way up, and then pick up on the way back down. Uh, but we would have to drag those big black racer hoses, those big Goodyear crossover hoses. Those things were, I think they were 20 or 25 feet long and extremely heavy. All of the Kentucky's barges, with the exception of it was either 2 or 3, had the raised trunks. They were a uh, integrated barge. They would haul diesel fuel. They had saddle tanks that they hauled diesel fuel in, and then they had the upper part of it and down in the trunk were hot oil that they would haul in them. So they were universal barges, but they never used them for anything but just the diesel fuel is all they would use them for. And anyhow, the old crossover hoses, we would have to connect them and get it all set up and ready to go into the dock, right before we would get in up there. And then you would have to strip the tanks on the way back south, mop the tanks. And that's where so much different today than it was back then. You had a mop head tied onto a sash cord, and you would swing that cord, and mop them tanks and pull it up, wring it out into a mop bucket, and then you'd have to put it into a 55-gallon drum. And then they would put the drums off down at the shipyard below below Port Allen down there whenever we would get in. But I can remember being out there and mopping tanks and getting so hot that first trip that I almost passed out. And there's a big difference in my size now than when I started. I weighed 135 pounds when I started on the boats, and now I scale about 285. So, but I am on a diet, and my wife says it's a seafood diet. So, yeah. But that's I guess that's about the gist of all that.
So it was all tank barges with Exxon, or were y'all hauling? Was pet coke much of a thing back in '85?
Yeah, we did. I don't remember. There was a couple of times I think that we did have some pet coke barges in tow, but not very often. Most of the time it was just strictly tank barges. Whenever I left Exxon, I had made it into the wheelhouse. Was on the Exxon Brownsville. That was in '92. And I was running from Port Arthur to Corpus Christi, pushing hot oil barges, lube balls. I mean, not lube balls, but what was that? PGO, processed gas oil. It had a really thick paraffin base to it, like a wax, and it it stunk really bad. But yeah, there's some of the stuff that we used to do then. They some of the safety folks and environmentalists and stuff would probably pass out if they saw someone do it today. But we didn't know any better. So,
Well, tell me a little bit more about that. You mentioned swinging a mop, cleaning up the tanks. Were you cracking open cargo tanks and actually getting in them? I mean, what was the actual
yeah,
process you were doing?
we never actually got down in the tanks, but you would have the hatch open on the dome, and you would take that mop, drop it down in there, and just swing it as far as you could get it to swing, and drop it and let it soak up the gas or diesel fuel or jet fuel, whatever it was, and pull it up out of the dome, put it in the mop bucket, wring it out, do it again till you fill that mop bucket up. And then you take the mop bucket and pour it into a 55-gallon drum. And, everybody And it's bad that it was that way, but it was. I mean, it's as far as getting a little drop of diesel fuel or gas, on somewhere and everybody screaming that you got a spill, you would have it running, across the top of the barge. It might run over the edge, and you'd go over there, if you seen it doing it, wipe it up, get it cleaned up, and but it, like I said, times were so much different back then than they are today, and uh, it is sad to say that a lot of times stuff got in the water that it shouldn't have, but it wasn't looked at the way it is today. People didn't actually care like they do today. Uh, and thank God that something, was finally changed about that, because, it has helped the environment tremendously, So yeah, there are changes that's been made throughout the years that have helped. Uh, a lot of them are a big inconvenience, but it sure makes it nicer whenever you can ride up and down the river and you're not constantly seeing a sheen everywhere. And I never saw it or never witnessed it myself, but at times the upper part of the Ohio and the Illinois, uh, they said if you dropped a match in there, it would just start to blaze. Uh, like I said, I never saw it, but I do know that if you fell in the water up there during that time, you went to the hospital and they pumped your stomach. I know a couple of gentlemen that uh, they they endured that. So that was a fact. So it wasn't just hearsay. I've seen that happen. But when it's that polluted, something needed to be done, and I'm thankful that it did.
Well, in your 10 and a half years at Exxon, so 85 to late 95, I guess, 96,
Mm.
um, do you recall any incidents that you witnessed or heard about that certainly wouldn't happen today with the safety procedures? Obviously, the sheen on the water was a change, but did any others come to mind?
Well, yeah, the when when the Valdez incident happened, that was that made a tremendous change in the whole industry, uh, especially on the liquid cargo side of everything. It was a, I guess, a wake up call for everybody. Uh, Whenever that happened, I know some guys that were in the wheelhouse that it made a life changing, life altering event for them, because at Exxon, whenever the Valdez incident happened, they started anyone that had a DUI on their record could no longer be in the wheelhouse. So after that happened, then there were several guys that were real good wheelmen that ended up losing their job as a wheelman. Some of them went to the engine room, and some of them changed company. Uh, and they lost some good wheelmen during that time. Uh, but they're, like I said, the transfer procedures and stuff, uh, they made some big changes along that era. The uh, vapor recovery stuff, all of that come into effect. The process of how you walked around on the barge and were looking at the inside of the tanks and stuff like that. That became a no-no. They started having closed hatch systems. Uh, the whole industry, just it changed. Uh, and I know it was not only that part of it, as far as the Valdez, there were some other incidents that happened, with some spills and stuff uh, that created a lot of changes as well. So, yeah, they there were quite a few, you know, uh, deals where it made it difficult for anybody that had a DUI on their record to advance. I'm not saying that you couldn't advance, but if it had anything to do with being in charge of carrying the products, uh, then you pretty well could count yourself out of the equation as far as moving up.
I think you told me before the interview here, your next stop was 3 years at Canal. Fill me in on the transition from Exxon to Canal, how different maybe the company cultures were, HR policies, things like that. And then I think you said you were already in the wheelhouse. So walk me through your time with Canal.
Yeah, I had been in the wheelhouse. Let's see, I got in the wheelhouse in '92 at Exxon, and '95, the latter part of '95, I started at Canal Barge. Uh, they and the reason for me leaving Exxon was there started rumors, about them selling the boats and stuff, and I was wanting to get into the river. They had me in the canal, and they never would really give me a shot at moving out into the river. And I I called Canal up and asked them, if they would post me up in the river. And so Paul Barnes told me, yeah, he would give me a shot. Uh, and I had a couple of guys that had already left from Exxon and went over to Canal, and they knew me and knew what my uh, work ethics were, and felt like I'd done a good job and felt like I was worth giving a shot. And they put in a good word for me, and so I moved over to Canal and started out first trip on the Caroline. Posted up on the Caroline with Captain Jimmy Wilkerson and Kelly Walters, and then went to the Hamilton and stayed on the Hamilton, I guess, for about eight trips, something like that. And then to the Luke Burton, and from the Luke Burton went to the Joseph Merrick Jones. And that's where I started pushing on pushing the heavy tows and stuff, 25, 30 barges. A lot of times we would have you ever seen the lash barges?
I
What
don't
they
believe
call
so. I don't think so.
they're small cube black container barges that they used to have a couple of ships that would come in down down at the docks in New Orleans, and they would load those lash barges that they called them. They had on all four corners, they had a little steel pyramid, and the bottom of the barge had a receptacle, and it would sit down on top of that pyramid on all four corners, and they would stack them up, and they would haul bukus of those lash barges, in and out, just like containers. Except that, they were smaller and stacked, and you may have anything from Harley Davidsons to sawdust in one of those lash barges. They they were about as I guess the best way to put it is they were very hard to wire in to a tow. You had to come up with a unique way of getting them wired in to hold them together, because the tow was so flexible. You had so many couplings out there, it was hard to get it rigid enough that you could go up the river without it breaking in two. And we would have sometimes two strings of 5-piece units with regulation barges, and then have 40 or 50 lash barges out there in tow. And these lash barges were like 25 feet wide, or yeah, about 20, 25, 20, 26, something like that, I think, wide, and between 30 and 35 feet long. And like I said, it just, you could take three of those, I think it was three lash barges, and would equal out to, like, with the length of a 195, but you would be short, so you'd have one overlapping, in each coupling and stuff like that. And it just made it really hard to get everything wired together. We would pull in at Waterman Fleet, and those guys out there packing that rigging, it was nothing. 200-300 sets of rigging. Take it off of one tow when we'd come in, roll it up, tie it, put it on the boat, take it right across the river, and take it right back off and wire in another tow. So as far as them having to have exercise equipment, they didn't need anything. They was all bulked up and rigid from packing all that rigging all day long, But that was the transition, I guess, from Exxon to Canal.
And it looks like you found your way to R&W for 8 months. So tell me about that experience. But then there was a length of time, your tenure with MEMCO, AEP, and then ACBL. So let's walk through that phase of your career.
I went, when I left Canal, I went from Canal to R&W, R&W was running, they had a pretty steady run with the Midland is the one that I hired on to work on, but they were a 2-for-1 job. And I was really wanting to get in with Midland, is who I was after getting on, getting a job with. So I talked with the port captain there at R&W and Mr. Lehman Lane, and he's a really good man, really Christian man. He gave me an opportunity, and he told me, he said, or he asked me, he said, what makes you want to work on the heavy tows like this? And I said, it's something I've always wanted to do. I said, if I'm going to stay out here, that's where I want to be. So he gave me a shot, and I told him, I said, now I'm wanting a day-for-day job. I said, I've got a family at home. I said, I want to be to where I can have my time at home with my family. And then he said, well, we work 2-for-1. I said, I understand that. I said, I'm just letting you know straight up. I want a day-for-day job, and I would like to work my way into Midland. And anyway, right after I started working there at R&W, then they started talking about selling Midland, and Ingram bought out Midland. So I told him I'd give him 6 months, and if I wasn't day for day somewhere, I'd be looking. And nothing against him, but that's what I was after. So 6 months after I was there, never did see anything out of a day for day. So I started looking, and Captain Jimmy Brown, well, actually Jeff Stover was who I talked to at MEMCO, and Jeff gave me a interview, or told me he would talk to him about an interview, and I ended up doing an interview sitting in the parking lot at West Kentucky. It's the place up there where they do the drug test. He told me to come in and they'd do a drug test, and he'd interview me, and we'd go from there. So that's what I done. And I interviewed with Captain Jimmy Brown, and sitting there in the parking lot, and he gave me a job, and he told me, he said it was right close to Christmas. He said, if I can let you stay off for Christmas, he said, we'll wait until after Christmas to get you in and get you started. He said, if something comes up, he said, I'll call you. So I went home, was planning on being off for Christmas, and the day before Christmas, Captain Jimmy called me up. He said, hey, Steve, this is Jimmy Brown. I said, yes, sir. He said, I told you I'd leave you off for Christmas if I could. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, it's down to you or me. He said, looks like you draw the short straw. So he called me, and he told me, he said, I need you to catch a boat. When can you be in Memphis? So that's where I started on the Noble Sea Parsonage with MEMCO. And I went up there and relieved him the night before Christmas in Memphis, and worked there until, well, like I said, the AEP bought MEMCO out, and that was one of the best jobs I ever had with AEP. I'll have to say they, hands down, we didn't know how good we had it. And I was probably one of them that was grumbling about more money, more money, more money. And it's always about the money, you know, but, you don't realize the benefits that you have sometimes when you're asking for more money. You're already getting more money and you don't see that. But, the older you get, the more of those benefits really start to shine. So for all those guys out there that go after chasing that dollar, they need to think about them benefits. They add up in the long run. No doubt about that. But yeah, I stayed there. The Donna Russian. I was on the Noble Sea for that one trip. Then I went to the Donna Russian and rode it for a while, and had Captain Tom Flint and Captain Vernon Sturgeon were the two captains on there. Learned a lot from those two guys, and you know they were seasoned, and it was just both of them had a way, you know, of saying things, and it just, you never really think about what they're saying until you sit there for just a little bit. You know, maybe a day or two later, and it clicks, you know. So that's what he was telling me. That's why he was saying what he did, you know, and the way he said it. And I really admired those two gentlemen for their way of handling their crew, their way of representing themselves and our industry. You know, they just had a way of carrying themselves, and I always, you know, I always would hear people talk about all these old guys. You know, you'd hear a name like Captain Vernon Sturgeon or Tom Flint or you know, just some of the names that just they catch. Captain Henry off of the Ray A. Exxon, you know, and you always sit back and say, you know, I hope one of these days, you know, somebody will be able to say, I know that old dude. He's been up and down the creek for a while, you know, he's seen a little bit of all of it. And I haven't seen all of it, but I've seen quite a bit. I've seen some of the lowest water and some of the highest water, and it it takes running back and forth on that lower Mississippi, especially, you know, time after time and seeing it at different stages, seeing it at some of the lower stages and some of the higher stages, and you'll never go up and down there and not learn something different about that river. It has a personality of its own and over the years they've tried to tame it, tried to keep it at bay, so to speak. But every once in a while, she'll show her backbone and flex her muscles, and everybody will see, she does what she wants to when she wants to. So they've got enough rock. Lure Brothers has put enough rock, them and Pine Bluff and some of the other rock outfits have put enough rock in there that they've got it to where it keeps it pretty well flushed out at most of the time. Used to, whenever I started out there was you didn't go very far that you didn't see a dredge out there somewhere during low water. And a lot of the crossings and stuff, they're not even there anymore. They've got it channeled out now to where everything is it stays at a depth that you can pretty well run just about at any time. But it's made a lot of changes over the years, no doubt. But back to the AEP, whenever ACBL bought the commercial side of AEP out, I stayed at ACBL for a while, and I had reached a point where I don't know if I was kind of getting burnt out or what it was. I just needed a change, and decided that I was going to go home for a while. So I did, and I took some time at home and started me a little land clearing business up, and then COVID come in, and that kind of got shot in the foot. But I was tripping, and during that time, somebody, buddy of mine from ARTCO, called me up, told me they had an opening at ARTCO, and wanted to know. He told me, said, I think you'd be a good fit. Why don't you give it a shot?
Before we get too far into the ARTCO story, I had a few questions about your time at MEMCO and AEP. You mentioned the Donna Rushing. Did you know David Rains and Charlie Kulagi?
Yep, sure did.
Did you? Tell me about meeting those guys and what your association with them was.
David was just getting into the wheelhouse. He, as a matter of fact, I guess whenever he started in the wheelhouse, he rode a couple of trips. I don't know if he wouldn't. I want to say he was riding with someone else steering, and then I was on the boat with him at the same time. And he may have even ridden on my watch a couple of times. I'm not sure. Can't remember. But David went. I'm trying to think. Maybe Sam Keeman was who David steered with. Don't quote me on that. I think that's who might have steered David. But And Kulagi, uh, he was he was in there right along that same time. Uh, yeah, both of those guys. They Charlie was he's a different character altogether. I mean, hey, it, if you know Charlie Kulagi, he's a free spirit. That's all. That's all you can say. It dude is just he's out there. Uh, a super nice guy. Uh, I always thought the world of him, or think the world of him. And David, David's got an arrogance about him that you know, he just has that aura. You know, he can be a sure enough butthole, but he has over the years he's really gotten good at what he does. Uh, he he's a character. I've always liked David. You know, a lot of people may not like David, but David's David. He don't put on a front for anybody, and and Charlie doesn't either. I mean, they're both of them are true characters to to the to their era. You know, they just they're good guys.
The first boat I rode overnight on actually was the Donna Rushing with David at the sticks.
Oh yeah.
Uh, they had upgraded it to some sort of environmentally friendly,
Oh yeah. I
all that
remember.
stuff. That had happened already when I got on there. That galley was nicer than any kitchen I've ever been in at
Oh
any house I've ever been in.
yeah.
But I've got a couple hours with David published from last
Yeah.
year, and with Charlie about 8 hours actually.
Oh
So
goodness.
I'll send you links to those after we finish up here. A
Okay.
couple more questions before we move on to ARTCO. You mentioned it, so I thought I'd ask, what was the opinion, your opinion, or I guess the opinion of any of your acquaintances when Ingram acquired Midland?
Uh, well, I think it was kind of I want to say it was a shock. Uh, because Midland was, yeah, at least I thought Midland was a pretty good size outfit. You know, uh, it was kind of like uh, AEP. It was a shock to see something of that magnitude. You know, uh, I always thought that the things at AEP, you know, were going good, going great, and then all of a sudden, you know, they switched channels. You know, they decided they wanted something different. Uh, I don't know if that's what Midland did or what the reasoning behind it was, but Midland always had, to me, they were they were top shelf when it come to the way that their computer system was laid out. Uh, they were one of the first, I guess, uh, that had the computers and stuff on the boats, and the way that they had it laid out was, you know, it was something that just it always mesmerized me the way you could go on their computer and look up and see who was on the other boats, what they had in tow, where they were dropping, what they were picking up. You know, it it was a big change. You know, getting on the one of their boats to see how everything was working versus how, like, when I was working at Canal Barge, they were just starting to try to get the computer stuff on theirs, and they were having a lot of growing pains with it, and it was more of a hindrance than it was anything else. And when I worked at Exxon, right before I left there, they had just started putting computers on their boats, and that was a nightmare. They their system was just out in left field. But and to answer your question as far as uh, what was I guess the feeling of whenever Ingram bought out Midland, I think it was just a shock to everybody as far as I could tell. And I didn't, the feedback that I was hearing was they didn't see, everybody didn't understand how Ingram could be able to buy Midland because it was going to be a monopoly, and how big they were going to be. So, but I guess they showed everybody, and they came through. They got it. And
Was it a similar feeling when ACBL acquired AEP?
yeah, it was. It sure was. Yes, sir. I didn't. I really thought for a while. I thought that AEP was going to buy ACBL because they actually bought some of the boats. The Callaghan and the what is it, the Randall Shamness now, and some of them that they bought they ended up, the hulls were in such bad shape that they got rid of them, sent them overseas or something, I think. But yeah, I would have never thought that it would have ended up the way it did. It really surprised me.
Well, I know you told me during your time as a trip pilot, COVID hit and you were down about 6 months. Fill me in on any of those details. Clearly, you made it through, but might have been a rough go. And then walk me through your time with ARTCO so far.
Yeah, I had started with ARTCO in 2020. What was it? I think it was April of 2020 when I started with ARTCO, and I want to say made maybe 3 or 4 trips I had been with them, and I came down with COVID, and I got off the boat on January. Yeah, got off the boat in January, and then was doing a job with my cutter and stuff, and while I was on my off time, and come down with COVID, and it really hit hard. I stayed in the hospital for about 5 days with it, and I still have problems with my breathing some from COVID. Doctors told me that it scarred my lungs up enough that I may not ever get over it, but it's it it helped or helped me realize that, you know, if you've got a job and you've got insurance, you might want to hang on to it, and especially if it's good insurance, because that paid off during that time. Uh, uh, and I don't know if it was because of the government was paying, you know, the picking up the tab or whatever uh, on some of it, but the whole time I was off, uh, I'm trying to think, May, from January till May, I want to think. May is when I went back on the boat. Uh, and I was off that whole time. I never missed a check. Uh, so yeah, ARTCO, they've been good to me. I I know they're a little different. Uh, they it's a, I don't know if it's a mindset or what. Uh, when you hear somebody say something about an ARTCO boat, the first thing they think of is the super tows that, you know, go up and down the river on that lower. But they do a little bit of all of it, you know, and they they've got good equipment. Uh, they they load the wagon, but they've got the horses to pull it, you know. So I I never thought that I would want to be on the 6 links, you know, most of my career. Uh, but actually, after getting involved in it and seeing it for myself, it's not that bad. Uh, it's just like any of the rest of it. You use it like it should be used, and learn what the traits of it are, and how it handles, and you, you can make it work to your advantage. Uh, but if you're in the wrong position, it'll work against you as well.
What's your normal tow? Is it 6x5, 6x6?
Most of the time, 36, 42. Uh, sometimes we'll do the 46, just, you know, river conditions permitting. 46 south. Uh, we the most I've had on there is 56 northbound. Uh, and we we were faced up to 64 down at Paulina and on standby, waiting to, you know, start staging empties up the creek, you know, and they they ended up sending us out with a 49 barge tow, and then I think the Spirit ended up taking that one, if I'm not mistaken, 64. 72. I don't know if I don't know if that Spirit took 72 yet or not, but uh, you know, the old KD, uh, Miss KD, it was known for having the 72 up through the Memphis bridges there, and that's now the Mark Canoy, uh, and the I've never ridden the uh, oh, doggone it, can't think of the uh shoot Not the pillar, but what is the other one? The big one at ARTCO. Well, there goes that COVID again. Uh, uh, that's bad when you got it right on the end of your tongue and you can't say it. But
It's one of the co-op boats?
yeah, no, it's the Heritage, American Heritage.
Okay.
They say it and the Mark Canoe are pretty well tit for tat on backbone. What they'll handle. I know when the Mark Canoe was the Jeffrey G. Stover, I rode it with Ty Wilkerson and at AEP, and that jewel, if you just set it to backing without giving it a little bit of time to get everything tight, it would come unbridled. And that's just like the Andrew McMillan that I ride. You know, it's 10.5, and you start handling those boats that size, and you have to keep that in the back of your mind whenever you start making a reaction. You know, you better give it a little bit of time to let everything tighten up, because if you don't, it'll make things happen. And but I do enjoy what I do, and it's something that not everybody in the world can just jump in there and start doing it. It's something it takes years of experience, you know.
Well, one final question here, Cap. Going back about 40 years, do you recall any good stories from the days you started that the old mates, the old pilots, the old captains would share about life on those boats out there on the water, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s? Did anything come to mind that surprised you, that you were shocked that it was so different in 85, and now, of course, far different from what it was?
Yeah, I worked with a mate on the Exxon Kentucky, Bit Kendrick. He used to talk about the old wooden barges that they would push barge loads of wine in those barges, and he said they would have a federal man ride the barges or ride the boat with them, and every time they went out to check tow, that federal man had to go check tow with them to make sure that they didn't mess with that wine barge. Well, during the process of whenever he would go out with them to check the tow and they would come back, there was a guy that would stay back to do the cleanup on the boat. Well, he would go out there, and one of the bleeder valves that let the pressure valve on the pump, he'd have a 5-gallon bucket. He would get him a 5-gallon bucket of wine, you know, and that was one of the stories they would tell. And the same mate, Bit Kendrick, he was in the military. From what he told me, he retired out of the military, and he had a 1-cup coffee pot that he always drank his coffee out of. It was a little percolator pot, and it's just 1 cup. Well, I was going to, you know, make myself shine, I guess, or do a good deed. Bit he was on the opposite watch that I was on, and I got his little pot, and I got me a Brillo pad, and I cleaned that pot and had it shined up because it was all dark and seasoned up. Man, you'd have thought I shot him. He crawled my tail. Don't you ever. He said, "Do you realize how many years it took me to get that coffee pot like that?" And uh that that's just a couple of deals there. I mean, uh there there's been so many that have, I guess, made a impression, uh, you know, that I tried to learn from. You know, I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly uh, cycle. You're gonna work with some that's good, some that's bad, and some that's just pure ugly. But you can learn from each one of them. You don't have to take it to heart, you know, and be offended by it. You know, use it to your advantage. And that's what I've tried to do over the years. The ones that taught me the good things, I tried to keep it with me. The ones that I saw do the bad things, I've tried to make sure that that's something that I didn't follow the footsteps of. And the ones that was ugly, you know, I just make sure that I stayed away from any routine they might have had, and make sure that I didn't follow in those steps, you know. So it's it becomes second nature, uh, and you have to learn. There's a boat life, and there's a home life, and you have to make a transition each time you go from one to the other, and that's really hard to do sometimes. My wife tells everybody a lot of times that she lets me think that I'm in charge when I'm home. So, and there's a lot of truth to that.
You're certainly not the only wife in the world making
Yeah.
their husbands feel that way.
Right.
Well, Cap, look, I do appreciate your time this morning. I think that'll do it for my questions, man. Anything else to share about the industry or this podcast project or anything else to say this morning?
No, I don't guess so. I appreciate the time, and appreciate your interest, and you talk to Devin, you tell him I said thank you very much for thinking of me, and uh, appreciate him being a good person that he is.
We'll do it, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. You take
Yes,
care.
sir. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.